Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar on public service loan forgiveness. We are so happy you're here. So excited to have some special guests with us today. And we're really excited that we could make this program happen for you. It's been a long time in the making, and we're really glad that it's finally come together. So I'm going to go ahead, turn the time over to Ellen, who's going to announce who we've got with us today.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you all for being here today and responding to my million emails on contact, begging everyone to come to this. We have been working with Senator Murphy's office for the past few months to get this program off the ground and available to you. It's a really unique, time-sensitive opportunity for all of us who work in public service, whether it is schools, whether it is public libraries, whether it is academic libraries, to get our loans paid off. And I'm so happy to have you here today to learn about that. At this time, I want to introduce you to Chandra from Senator Murphy's office. She does education casework, and she's been instrumental in helping us get this program off the ground today. Chandra, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Happy to have organized this with my colleagues here in the state and down in DC. My name is Chandra Prasad. I have been doing education casework for Senator Murphy for a few years now. Like Alan and Amanda have mentioned, this is a really exciting time in terms of seeing actual items being happen in terms of student loans. And, being a public employee myself, it's really vital for not only federal employees, but state and local employees to know what this program is about and to take advantage of what's being offered out there right now. Don't want to go too much into what the senator will say. He has provided us with a video because he wasn't able to be here today. I am here in the state as well, and I will provide my contact information in the chat. So should anybody have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or give me a call. I also want to shout out the Bloomfield Library because I live in Bloomfield, so it's good to see someone here from the Bloomfield Library. Thanks so much.
Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead, share my screen, share this video that Senator Murphy sent over.
Hey, everybody, this is Chris Murphy, U.S. Senator from Connecticut. I want to thank all of the library workers throughout the state for all of the essential work that you do every single day. Libraries are just indispensable parts of our community. I spent hours and hours and hours at the Cheshire Public Library and the Wallingford Public Library with my kids growing up. The outreach that you do to families, the resources that you provide are absolutely essential. What I know from our community in Connecticut that doesn't have access to the internet is that libraries are the place where they go search for housing opportunities, for job openings. You provide an essential service there as well. And now as the parent to an 8th grader and a 5th grader, I know how much libraries mean to their development as learners. So you guys are just right at the heart, at the center of our communities. And obviously during the pandemic, your work was had to be innovative, but was no less essential. I want to make sure that you all know about the opportunity that the Biden administration has created to apply for student loan forgiveness. This is an exceptional opportunity, and I want to make sure that every library worker who has student loans does the due diligence to make sure you know if you're eligible for forgiveness. That can make a big difference to many of you who work in the profession. And if you need help trying to discover your eligibility, please reach out to our office. But it's a real opportunity, an opportunity for us to give back to so many of you who have given throughout your career to your community.
Excellent. So thank you to Senator Murphy and Senator Murphy's office for putting this together for us and arranging. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter today. We have with us Kirin Jessel from the U.S. Department of Education. We are so happy that she is here with us. She is an ombudsman specialist at the federal student aid of the U.S. Department of Education, and she's an attorney specializing in higher education and student loan law. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to you, Kirin.
I'm muting myself. Hello, it's so nice to be here and to be able to go over the PSLF program with all of you. I find this, it's just like a really, really lovely, amazing opportunity. So it's honestly a joy to be able to share it with you and hopefully get you excited about potential loan forgiveness here. So I have a presentation. We will be sharing the slides with you after. So I won't be going through every slide in depth. I'm going to give you kind of a basic overview of what to think about now. And these resources will all be available for you. And then hopefully we will have time at the end. I'm going to try to save time for a Q&A session so I can get some of your questions answered. So yeah, with that, we can get started. So public service loan forgiveness, we can go on to the next slide. So before I get into PSLF, I want to just mention briefly the thing that is in the news. So Biden's one-time targeted student loan relief. So you've probably heard about this. You can go on to the next slide. It's going to be $10,000 per person, or if you received a Pell Grant, it could be $20,000 per borrower. And so this is loan forgiveness done through the COVID authorities, and it will apply to anyone who is earning less than $125,000. The application is in beta mode. It is now live. And you can actually go and apply right now. It takes 2 seconds. It's so easy. It's your name, date of birth, social security number, and then you need to attest that you meet that income qualification. So that's it. Do it, get it done. There's no reason not to do it. So go ahead, get that forgiveness. And this is, you know, again, a different program. It's Biden's one-time debt forgiveness program. And this is a different program than PSLF, so you can get both. And the department will apply one and then the other. You don't need to worry about it. Just apply for everything. One thing I want to just flag is that for the $125,000 threshold, it is in the 2020 or 2021 tax year. So if you were making less than $125,000 in either of those years, you still qualify. So let's say you were in school in 2020 and now you make I don't know, a lot of money. So you wouldn't qualify for this year, but you qualified in 2020. That's totally fine. You still qualify. Go ahead and apply. And so that link to the application is right here. And also we've shared that in the chat as well. All right. The limited PSLF waiver. So this is the point of this presentation. I would say waiver is a little misleading. It's kind of a waiver in a legal sense in that the rules, the normal PSLF rules are getting loosened up so we can fix a lot of the problems that have been in the PSLF program previously, and make sure all borrowers and everyone who has, you know, given us public service gets rewarded and gets the loan forgiveness they deserve. So it's not a different application. It's the same application. It's the same form. You're really not doing anything different. It's just making sure that you qualify for kind of these looser rules. And I will go through what those looser rules are. So this slide kind of gives you some information about just the volume we're seeing. So there's so many people have applied already. It's been wonderful to see, and we want you all to continue to apply if you haven't already. We're going to add on more and more and get relief for as many people as possible. Next slide. So this is the agenda. So I will walk through first the basics of the PSLF program in general and talk about what that program looks like normally. And then I will compare that to what it looks like under the waiver. And then the last 2 sections are just kind of a guide for you as you're doing your PSLF paperwork, and then resources that you might need as you're doing your application, and what kind of help is available for you out there. Next slide. All right. Okay, so what is public service loan forgiveness? I'm sure everyone in this room is sick of this term and you've already heard about it, but just in case, this is a congressional program they authorized 2007, 2008 to reward public servants for their work contributing to our communities by discharging loans. So next slide. So what do you have to do to get PSLF? Well, you need 120 qualifying payments. So that translates to 12 payments a year. So 10 years qualifying payments at the time while you are working for a qualified employer. Talk about what a qualified employer is. And then you have to usually apply for PSLF forgiveness and receive your discharge while you are still working for a qualified employer. Okay, next slide. So what types of loans are eligible for PSLF? So the way Congress wrote the program, only direct loans were eligible, and direct loans are a newer type of loan that's been issued kind of more recently. And there's some older type of loans like Perkins loans or FEL loans that weren't written into eligibility for PSLF. So we've had a lot of borrowers run into problems because they just didn't have the right loans, but they've been working in public service, and why are they not getting relief? That is what the waiver is here to do. We're trying to get you that relief because yes, you've been working in public service. So direct loans can include consolidated direct loans, and then also things like graduate plus or parent plus loans. So if you aren't sure what type of loans you have, log on to your FSA portal at studentaid.gov and take a look at your loan breakdown. There's a slide coming up that will describe exactly what that process looks like if you're confused. You can also call your servicer. Next slide. So what counts as an eligible payment under the normal public service loan forgiveness program? Well, it has to be on time, and it has to be at least for the amount due, and it has to be in either an income-driven repayment plan, and there are 4 of those, or in a standard plan. What doesn't count is late payments or payments that are in some other type of repayment program. So like an extended, alternative, or graduated payment program. Also payments that were just too little didn't count, or made when they were like not required. So maybe you paid ahead of time while you were in school, you added some money. Well, that wasn't like an official payment. So that doesn't count under the normal public service loan forgiveness program. I do want to iterate though that like even if you missed a payment 1 month, but you made it the next month, that month that you did make it for, that's still going to count. As long as you're not in default, it doesn't matter if the payments are consecutive. Next slide. So one thing to know though is even if you did make a payment that was too small, if you made another payment that with that first one added up to your total amount due, that might still count as long as it's within 15 dates of the due date. And also some people like to prepay their IDR plans. I'm not one of these, but people do. And if you're on an income-driven repayment plan, you can usually pay for about a year in advance. And so you can get credit for those years, but you can't get credit ahead of time. So PSLF is 10 years of public service. That means you can't get forgiveness faster by paying faster. You have to serve those 10 months. If you pay ahead, great, but you got to put in that employment. There's some other rules for certain public workers, but I don't think any of those are applicable here. If you do have questions about those, you can feel free to post them in the chat. Next slide. So parent plus loans. So this is one type of loan that parents can take out to help their kids pay for college. There's kind of the rumor and like the way it's really worked out is that parent plus loans didn't usually qualify for PSLF. However, they are technically able to qualify. So there's just been a lot of confusion about this. And so this is something we've tried to fix under the waiver. And I will go through exactly what this looks like under the waiver. But in general, on PSLF, they are eligible, but you just had to be in the right repayment program. And the only repayment program that qualified is one called Income Contingent Repayment, or ICR. And this program is one of the 4 IDR repayment plans, and it's the most expensive or least generous. So a lot of people weren't choosing this and didn't know this is the one you had to be in to make your parent plus loan count for PSLF. So I will talk about what exactly you should do about this under the waiver moving forward. Next slide. Keep going. Okay, so eligible employment. So what counts as eligible employment? Government workers, I'm guessing that's everyone here. You count, all levels of government count, tribal government, state government, city, whatever, it all counts. 501c3 nonprofits count as well. There's some other like types of nonprofit organizations that are not 501c3s that can also count. The other thing about eligible employment is it needs to be full-time. And we define full-time by 30 hours a week or more. You can have multiple qualifying employers that add up to 30 hours a week. That's fine, that totally works. What doesn't work are volunteer hours, anything where you're not an employee receiving a W-2. So if you're an independent contractor working for a for-profit company that is contracting for a government, that won't qualify because it's not the thing that matters is your employer. Similarly, labor unions don't count, and political groups as well. Next slide. So again, it's all about the employer. And it doesn't really matter what you do for the employer, what your job function is. You can be customer service agent, librarian, whatever you do, it doesn't matter as long as your employer is qualified. So again, it's all about that employer. And next slide. Okay, so I think probably people have heard of temporary expanded PSLF, and I just want to take a moment to differentiate this program from the basic Pls program and from the waiver. So temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness is a separate program that Congress enacted to try to help people that weren't qualifying for normal PSLF just because they were in the wrong repayment program. So this might be somebody in this room. Just know that TEPSLF still exists. The application form is still out there. You might apply. If you are looking for this, keep going, apply. This program is open and available. Next slide. Okay, so moving into the waiver. So COVID payment pause, right? So a lot of the legislation Congress passed in COVID gave the department a little bit more ability to do things to fix how the Pslf program was implemented. And so that's how we have been able to do the waiver. However, you also probably are all well aware that we've been in a payment pause for the last 3 years. Payment is scheduled to resume on January 1st, so keep that in mind. But because of the payment pause, the payments that you would have made each month, so the last 36 or so months, will all count towards PSLF in your accounts as long as you've been working for an eligible employer. So if you spent 1 year in the payment pause working for a company, but you spent 2 years working for a library, a city library, those 2 years will count towards your payment count under PSLF. So this is great. A lot of people don't know this, and this is something that will be adjusted on your account through the waiver, and then as we kind of go through and do holistic reviews of everyone's account over the next year or so. The one thing about this is to get credit for this, we need to know that you're interested in PSLF, right? If we don't know that you want PSLF, we're not going to necessarily apply these payments to your PSLF accounts because we don't even know that you want a PSLF account. So make sure you have submitted at some point, and we'll talk about what that looks like, your PSLF paperwork. Next slide. So let's go into the waiver and what this looks like. Okay, so this waiver has been around since for about a year now. The deadline to apply for this waiver, and I cannot reiterate this enough, is October 31st, 2022. So we have 2 weeks left on this waiver. So if you haven't applied yet, you're not sure what to do, we will talk about it, but get that application in by the waiver deadline. I just cannot encourage you to do this enough and reiterate over and over. It's October 31st, that's it, that's the deadline. Okay, so what happens under the waiver? Well, you can receive credit for payments that you've made in the past that otherwise wouldn't count towards PSLF. So you might think you're at 10 payments, but maybe under the waiver, once we go in and do the math, you might be much, much closer to forgiveness, or maybe you've achieved forgiveness. So how does this work? So it helps people who weren't in the right repayment programs or who had the wrong type of loan, but were still working at a qualified employer. Next slide. So again, so this slide kind of reiterates what I just said. It doesn't matter what loan you have. Is it a direct loan, FEL loan, Perkins, etc., what repayment plan you had, or loan type. However, we are not changing, nothing about the employment requirements has changed. You have to be in public service. It's public service loan forgiveness. That's the whole point. And then again, you need to apply by the October 31, 2022 deadline. All right, next question. Next slide. This is just a chart that gives you like a really clear breakdown of the differences between Pslf and the waiver. I've basically gone over this, but this is here for your reference. Next slide. Okay, so who is impacted? So there's different types of borrowers that will be impacted differently by the waiver. So my general advice is to use the Pslf help tool to apply and submit your Pslf paperwork. So this help tool, which I'll show you what this looks like, is an interactive kind of application fill out tool on studentaid.gov. This fills out the same application as kind of the paper Pslf application, if you've ever seen it, but it kind of just does it all for you and it generates the forms for you. And if you use the help tool, you have to log into your FSA, your studentaid.gov account. We know you've been in that help tool. We know you're interested in public service loan forgiveness. So as long as you get through the last step, through that console, we know that you're interested, that you want it, and then we know that we will consider it that you've submitted by the deadline. Because the second part of that application is you have to get your employer to sign it, right? Then you have to get the employer to sign it, upload it, or mail it in. That takes time. We know that. So get those forms generated in this Pslf help tool by the 31st. Okay, so who does this impact? Let's say you only have direct loans. Great, you're in good shape. You qualify for Pslf. You don't really have to worry about so much of these ins and outs that people with other loan types have to worry about, because the Pslf program was designed for direct loans and implemented for direct loans. So your job is to make sure that we know that you have eligible employment and for how long that eligible employment was. The closer you can get to 10 years, the closer you are to forgiveness. Show us that documentation, show us your employer record, use the help tool, submit, add in every single employer that qualifies, get those signatures and submit. That's it. Okay, let's say that you had some other type of loan. You had FFEL loan, you had Perkins loans, and you consolidated into direct loans in order to pursue the public service loan forgiveness. Excellent, that's the right thing to have done. Good work. However, under the waiver, we will go back and we will say, okay, that FFEL loan, well, you were paid on it for 2 or 3 years before you consolidated. Let's give you credit for those payments as long as you were working for an eligible employer at the time. So make sure, once again, when you go through the help tool, you submit an employer, you add those employers for while you had those loans before you consolidated. So you were working at one job while you had the FFEL loans and you consolidated, you switched jobs. Put that earlier employer in on this form so we can give you that credit. Okay. Okay, the last bucket. You still have Perkins loans or FFEL loans and you didn't know what to do with them and you were just waiting. So here's the guidance I have for you. Consolidate, 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 and do it now. As long as you consolidate these loans into a direct consolidation loan by the deadline, by 10/31, and I should revise and say, as long as you apply for consolidation by the deadline, there's a huge volume. We know it's taking time. Submit your application on studentaid.gov or through your servicer for consolidation by October 31. And as long as you submit your help tool application as well, you will be fine. You will be eligible for the waiver. We will take a look at your account. We'll go back and we'll give you credit for all those loan payments you made on previous loans before you consolidated into direct loan. So I just want to reiterate, this is really, really important because previously under the main program, once you consolidated from FFEL to direct loans, you only got credit from the time you consolidated onward. So it was like, it kind of restarted the clock, right? You had to start all over again. We want to give you credit. We know you did the work. You made those payments. You were working in public service. Let's get you credit. So consolidate your loans and submit your forms through the help tool. Okay. Next slide. Okay, Parent Plus. This is really confusing and I just want to go out and just say these are complicated rules. I'm going to do my best to break this down. I'm not sure how many of you have Parent Plus loans, but there's a significant population out there that's in this position. So I do think it's important to try to explain what's going to happen here. So as I said before, technically Parent Plus loans are eligible for Pslf, but a lot of times people weren't receiving that credit because they're in the wrong repayment plan for Pslf. So how are we going to approach this under the waiver? Consolidate your Parent Plus loans into a direct consolidation loan, and we will give you credit. But this is the caveat. We can't give you credit for the time you spent in repayment on Parent Plus loan. But if you consolidate a Parent Plus loan together with, let's say you had another FFEL loan or a Perkins loan, or even another direct loan, we'll give you credit for the time and repayment on that other loan. So we can't give you credit for the Parent Plus loan time and repayment, but we can give you credit for the other loans you've been paying off at the same time if you consolidate it with a Parent Plus loan. Another thing that people often ask is, who has to be in public service to get it applied for Parent Plus loans? So it needs to be the parent. So the person holding the loan has to be the one in public service, okay? So it doesn't matter if your kid is in public service. All that matters is you, the parent, the loan holder, are in public service, and you can get that credit. I think that's all I wanted to mention there. Yes. Okay, next slide. So this is the slide I mentioned earlier about how to determine your loan type. You can just do this by visiting our aid summary on studentaid.gov. If you're really confused, you can always call your servicer as well, although I personally don't like to be on the phone that much, so I like to do it online. So this is all available for you online under your loan breakdown section, and you can see it basically in the name of the loan. So it says direct loan, direct graduate loan, direct staffer loan, for example, or a FFEL loan would be this other different program. Perkins is a different program. So that's all here for your reference. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned for Parent Plus loan holders that you can consolidate with another loan and get some credit under the waiver towards PSLF. I want to just caveat that, however, with everybody really needs to make sure that's the right decision for them, because there are some negative consequences here. One, as with any consolidation, your principal will go up. Any unpaid interest will get what's called capitalized into your principal, and so your principal might increase. So that's one thing to know. Your interest rate might also change depending on the timing of the consolidation and what loans you consolidate. That is something you'll have to see. But we have a tool available on our website, and this is one of the links I've shared. This is called the Loan Simulator. And this tool, I recommend just go on, use it, put in your information, and it will actually model out what your payments will look like under different plans. So you can use it to see, okay, if I actually do the Parent Plus consolidation and I have to be in this income contingent repayment program, which is the least generous of all the income driven repayment programs, is it worth it to me to get Pslf? Maybe I'm going to have a higher monthly payment now. Do I want to go for that, or do I want to stay where I am now? So I really want to encourage you to, everybody, I can't give broad recommendations because everybody's situation is really different with this. And it really just depends on your income, how many loans you hold, a ton of different things. So use the Loan Simulator tool to try to figure out what the best solution is for you. Next slide. Okay, so one other thing that we are doing at the Department of Education to help borrowers is we're making an adjustment to people's Pslf balances kind of on our end. So this is something I'm just letting you all know about for awareness, but there's nothing you need to do for this. But you might see some accounts change in your Pslf counts in the future, and so we want to explain why and what's going on. So over the past few decades, servicers have been kind of steering borrowers into forbearance when maybe these borrowers were qualified for $0 income-driven repayment monthly payment. So basically, you were in forbearance. That means your interest is accruing, right? And your principal will eventually increase. When you could have been qualifying for $0 monthly payment, when that interest would not be increasing. So that wasn't good. We want to try to fix that for people. So how this is going to work is that if you have 12 months or more of consecutive forbearance, so the max of forbearance you're supposed to usually have is 12 months. So people ended up with more. And people who had 36 months total of cumulative forbearance. So again, you're not supposed to be in forbearance for that many months out of a decade. Be it, let's say that your servicer told you this was the right thing to do when you couldn't afford your payment, but you qualified for IDR. We're going to go back in and we're going to give you credit for those months you spent in forbearance for Pslf. We're going to pretend that you were actually just in income-driven repayment, that you paid those $0 monthly payments, because it's the same thing in effect. So we want to give you that credit. So we're going to do that on our end. The accounts will probably get adjusted over the summer. So it's not something you'll see immediately, but it's something you might see over the next year. There's a few other small caveats for types of deferments that can count under this account adjustment. That information is here. One thing to know, though, is if you feel like you were in forbearance steered. So your servicer told you to be in forbearance and they shouldn't have because you qualified for IDR. If this happened to you, but you weren't in there for 12 months, you were in there for 10 months, or you were cumulatively 24 months, just know that you're not totally out of luck. You can submit a complaint to our office. So that's the Ombudsman's office. I've put the link in the chat as well. You can submit a complaint and say that you think you were forbearance steered and that you should still be entitled to have those payments count towards PSLF. So I can't, I don't know, there's no promise or anything, but it is an argument that you can make and it's worth a try if you're in this situation. Next slide. Okay. So this is a little bit more of a breakdown on what types of things count under the IDR adjustment. Again, we don't need to worry about this. If you have specific questions about it, we can address those at the end. Next slide. All right, so what should you be doing now? So this first slide here is about the servitor transition that already happened. Everyone who is trying for PSLF should be with Mohela at this point. Unless you're kind of like on the cusp of forgiveness. So that's not something to worry about, but Mohela is a servicer that is now doing PSLF. So if you have questions about PSLF and you need to talk to the servicer, that is the person to call. So what about the help tool and getting advantage under the waiver? So as I said before, we encourage everyone to just do it. Just do it. Just get it done. There's no downside. Next slide. So what do you need to do to take advantage of the waiver? We need to know that you worked for qualified employers for X number of years, however much you've done so far. And then you need to consolidate any loans if you need to do that. And you need to do both of this by October 31st. So with consolidation, we know servicers are backed up. It's going to take some time. You probably, even if you submitted it today, you're not going to hear back whether or not you get consolidation by the 31st. So do them both now and don't wait. So submit, you can do it through studentaid.gov. You can submit your consolidation request and then also fill it out and generate your forms through the PSLF help tool. Do them both by October 31st, 2022. Next slide. Okay, so I'm not going to go too in depth because I really want to make sure that we have time for questions here. But I want to just point out a few features on the PSLF help tool. So this is, again, it's not like a different application than the main PSLF application, but it is how we're going to keep track of everyone and it just does it all for you. So please use this tool. So this tool has, can you skip ahead? I might need a few slides ahead. One more slide. Yes, one more. Okay, so this is the first part of the PSLF help tool. This is employment history. This is that part I need you to add every single employer you have that you think will qualify you for PSLF. So here at the bottom, you can see you can add employers. You need to add all of them, as I said, and you can actually search for the employers through what's called the employer identification number. So this is, you know, your employer's tax number, basically. And how this works is you all have a lot of coworkers, I'm sure. There's a lot of people, millions of people have already applied for PSLF. So we've already done employer reviews for many employers out there. So why reinvent the wheel? We're not going to go back and like check if your employer is eligible. If we know you worked for that employer and that we've already found out that employer is eligible through your coworker, we're fine, we're good to go. So get the get in that EIN, put it in the help tool, and you can search it, and then you can select your employer right there. And then just put in your start and end dates. So how much of this should you do? Well, do as much at a time as you can. So PSLF started in 2007, 2008, so you can't get credit before then. But you can get credit for everything since then if you've paid and you've been in qualified employers. So even if you're not sure that something will count, put down that employer information so we can see. And maybe we'll decide it doesn't count. Because your loans were weird or your payment was wrong or something, but if you can put it down, we can try to give you that credit. And under the waiver, you might really get it. So all the employers that you think would qualify from 2007 on, please add. Next slide. So that's just an indication of where to find the EIN on your W-2. If you don't have a W-2, you can contact your HR office and they can give you that number. Next slide. Next slide. This is the employer search I've just talked about. Keep going. This slide, yes. So 120, so this is the third step in the PSLF help tool. It's going to ask you, have you made 120 qualifying payments? So this is kind of a trick question. We have your information on file in the database. So we kind of already know, or at least we think we know, if you've made 120 qualifying payments or not. But you might disagree with us. And so we have had this situation where people say, yes, I've made it, and they try to select yes, and they can't, they have to select no. It doesn't matter. We were going to do a holistic review on your application. So just if you aren't allowed to select yes, select no, and keep going. So don't let this hold you out. Don't let this stop you. Next slide. Keep going. This is just your personal contact information. Make sure your contact information is updated. That's a general best practice, so we can contact you if we need to. Keep going, one more. Okay, so what does it look like to submit the PSLF help tool? What does this look like? So we use the word generate your form or submit your paperwork through the PSLF help tool, because actually what it does is it kind of like fills out all the paperwork for you, and then it asks you to download the paperwork and then get your employer's signature on that paperwork. So when you are doing the help tool, you're not necessarily submitting the application to us yet. You're filling out paperwork like you would for a tax form. And then we will generate that form for you. You print it out, you get your employer to sign it, and then the last step is actually coming back and submitting it to us. Okay, so I want to just be really clear about this though. As long as you get to this stage in the process, this exclamation point right here, you've completed the PSLF help tool, we will count that as having applied by the deadline of October 31st, 2022. We know employers all over the place, it can take you a minute to track them down. And honestly, people open mail, it takes time. So maybe you've sent it in, but they're not going to receive it or open it for another month. So we don't want you to be penalized for that. So use the help tool. As long as you get to this stage in the console, you will be fine, and it will be considered that you've applied for the waiver. Okay. So let's talk about how to actually submit the PSLF forms. So you're going to get a different form for every single employer you have listed. Each employer needs to sign it. And then once the employer signs it, you can either secure upload it through our website, that information's here, or you can mail it in or fax it. Next slide. So I just want to take 1 minute to talk about this. We've had a lot of rejections because of this. I don't want you to be one of these people. The signature matters. It needs to be what's called a hand-drawn signature. So it doesn't matter if that's with a pen or if it's electronically drawn. It just needs to be on a keypad or with a stylus, some way where they're actually tracing their signature. It doesn't work for them to type it in a font, for example, or to use a certificate-based signature. That won't work. We need that actual hand-drawn signature, whether digital or printed, or with a pen. Next slide. Okay, so the last thing I will say is that if you want to check your payment counts, these will kind of change a bit as we're doing the review process. You might even get temporarily sent to 0. Don't freak out if that's you. It's fine. You will get your updated payment counts. You'll be able to see these either at Mohela's website, your account there, or at studentaid.gov. Next slide. Keep going. This is just what it looks like to see your payment counts at studentaid.gov, or what it will look like. Next slide. And that's actually all I'm going to talk about for now. Let's skip ahead to the resources section. So maybe it's 5 or 10 slides. Okay, yes. So this is just basic information and resources for you as you're working on PSLF. So the first thing is how to access the waiver. And then there's tons of general information on PSLF on the department's website. So that link is here as well. Here's a link also to the help tool, and again, the mailing address or upload address for the forms once you have them signed by your employer. I also just want to mention really quickly, a lot of people sometimes get confused about who is it okay to have signed from your employer. And so most employers at this point are somewhat experienced with PSLF, so they'll know, but I know lots of small employers out there maybe haven't. So what you need is an authorized representative. So that may not be your supervisor. I would go through your HR office or whoever's in charge of that kind of function at your job to get that signature. Basically, they have to certify that you worked there. And so you have to make sure that the employer is having the right person sign. It can't just be a random person at your at your company. Okay, next slide. So last thing is just like, feel free to follow us on social media. We have lots of information out there, and we keep you updated on if we have any changes to the Pslf waiver program or any of other programs as we implement them in the future. So that's all I have to talk about in terms of the overview of the waiver, but I want to turn it over to questions. I know there's a lot, so I want to try to get through as many as I can. So Amanda, can you kind of like read me some of the questions from the chat or take them? I don't know how you want to do it, whatever works.
Sure can. Let's see what's in there. Okay, somebody says we can't apply yet if our federal loans were privately consolidated, right?
Right. So this is a really good point. So with FEL loans and some other older types of loans, they're actually not held by the department. They're actually owned by third-party companies or just other companies out there. So we don't really have a lot of power over what necessarily happens to those loans. However, you can consolidate certain private loans. These are kind of privately held FEL loans, not like totally private student loans, but these specific type of loans that are underwritten by the department into direct loans with the department. You should go ahead and submit that consolidation application, but you should also go ahead and do the help tool by the deadline. Please do both. We don't want you to miss out on the waiver adjustment.
Right. Somebody says she's already sent in her temporary PSLF application, okay, but now has another employment certification to send out, but doesn't think Mohela has her loans yet. Does she just send her entire application with a new certification form?
So the answer is probably yes. Basically, if you've done the application before, so you've seen it, there is a different application for DEPSLF. So that's a different application. So make sure you do that. It sounds like you might need to just send in an updated version of it. It's the same form. You just kind of like are submitting the new employer over and over with the new period of time that you've been employed with them for. So yeah, just go ahead and do it again.
Yeah, so another question is, why does the loan type matter if they're federal loans?
That's a really good question. So basically, it's how Congress wrote the law. So Congress wrote public service loan forgiveness to apply to one type of loan that is dispersed directly by the federal government, by the Department of Education, called direct loans. So previously, a lot of you have FEL loans, for example. Those were underwritten by the government, but they were actually dispersed by banks and other private companies or other companies, and it wasn't dispersed by us. So we, over time, have transitioned everyone into being direct loans. So now we only do direct loans, but for a long time, people mostly had these other types of loans. Very few people had direct loans, loans given directly from us to them. And so that's why it's just kind of like a quirk of history of how the loan program worked, but also just like how Congress ended up writing this law. So we want to try to do what we can to make sure that, you know, if you just happen to have a different type of loan through no fault of your own, it's just how the program works, you can still get credit through the waiver.
Okay. This next one said the eligible employment is where it gets sticky. On the Connecticut-based site outlining PSLF, it says working in the public service for 10 years, not as full-time. I wish it was correctly stated to avoid confusion. As someone who has worked in the field for more than a decade, but not necessarily full-time, this makes me not eligible for any financial help with my loans.
Right. So full-time, through the government definition that we use at the Department of Education to make this determination, is 30 hours a week. So if your employment, at the library, it sounds like if it wasn't 30 hours a week, then no, you wouldn't get credit. But remember, you can have multiple jobs. So if you were working 15 hours with one qualifying employer and 15 hours with another one, those can combine to get you full-time.
Great. So part-time jobs count as long as the multiple jobs equal 30 hours or more, just exactly.
Exactly. Got it.
Okay, somebody says she applied recently for the waiver and the credits she received for payments were way off. She doesn't know who to appeal to and never got through to anyone.
All right, so I would say one thing is Mohela is like processing things in stages. So you might get a letter that seems like the credits are way off, but actually they aren't. I don't know if that's your situation. If you applied early enough, maybe you did get a determination already. So I would submit to Mohela if you can get in touch with them. I've heard right now it's near the deadline. It's like a nightmare to get through is what I've heard. So just hold tight for a little while. You can submit a complaint to my office, the Ombudsman's office, and we will route that and work through it and take a look at what's going on with you. But I would say that they're still working on adjusting everyone's accounts, and they're doing it in stages. So like, even if you're getting something weird right now, they're like interim letters are reading a little weird. So just hold tight and give it a few months, and probably it'll work itself out.
Great.
Not just,
and then remind us, the consolidation has to be done by 10/31. Can you just reiterate?
yes, of course. So we just need you to apply for consolidation by 10/31. So the guidance has changed a little bit on this. We know it takes a little bit of time for a consolidation to go through. So if you applied for it now, you probably aren't going to get the consolidation done by 10/31, but we don't want you to miss out on the waiver because of that, right? So go ahead, submit that consolidation request now, and then go ahead and generate your forms through the PSLF help tool. That way we know that you've consolidated into the right loan programs and that you're interested in getting the benefit of the waiver, and then we will do the work on our end. So please go ahead and do both, and don't wait for the consolidation to come through before applying for the PSLF waiver.
We have someone here who has specific questions about TEPE. It's a long acronym.
I know, it's
that
like
one and the Graduate Plus loans. Namely, are they forgivable if they are consolidated? It's not been updated on my account and I can't find definitive info.
All right, so Graduate Plus loans, as long as they are grad direct loans is what they're called, and you can see this in your loan breakdown, those will just qualify straight out for PSLF. If you have another type of grad loan, you might need to consolidate those, but there's nothing inherent about grad loans that should make them unqualified. For TEPSLF, it might depend on your repayment plan and what repayment plan you are on. Those get kind of tricky, and it really just depends on your individual case, how that works out. So my same answer is, please go ahead and submit the help tool application. And also, if you've submitted for TEPSLF, make sure your employer is up to date, resubmit that if you need to add more employers. But otherwise, pursue all the avenues towards relief that you can. Don't leave it on the table.
Awesome. Can you see payments that were made on privately held federal loans before they were consolidated into direct loans?
Right. So this is the crux of the waiver, right? So is the question where to see whether those payments will count, or is it just if they'll count? So if you apply through the help tool by the deadline, we'll go back and be able to see if some of those payments will count. It's possible that they will, right? It's possible, but maybe they don't. We'll do the review and we'll be able to let you know. What was the second part of that? So the updated counts will be on your studentaid.gov website at loan servicing or through Mohela, but I would give that a little while. They're still working on it.
Great.
So they're not quite there yet.
Great. So another question, if we consolidated this year and we still don't quite meet the required number of payments, will we go back to zero when the waiver expires?
No, that's a great question. No. So you will get credit for however much credit you've done. So if you're on 2 years of credit through the waiver, great, that's 2 years of credit, you've got it. You're just going to build on that now going forward. You're not going to lose credit. Awesome.
There's a comment about someone having issues with the consolidation process for the past several months, with an error message about the system being down when they hit submit, regardless of browser or computer used. That does not sound good. I would try to get on the phone with your servicer to get the consolidation done. I don't know what website you're using. If it's through studentaid.gov, it should theoretically be working. Maybe there's some issue with your situation in particular. You can submit a complaint about this to the complaint office at Ed, and they can take a look at that for you as well. Great. And then someone says, unfortunately, no one responds to the feedback center.
It's the feedback center has a lot going through. Eventually you'll get a response, but it does sometimes take some time.
So what if you already submitted PSLF, but you haven't yet consolidated?
Okay. So if you already submitted PSLF and you had federally held FEL loans, Perkins loans, or some other type of loan that isn't direct, you might not get credit, right? because only direct loans qualified under the original PSLF program. If you have all direct loans and you applied for PSLF, you're fine, you don't need to consolidate. Consolidation is for people who need to convert their loans into direct loans, right? So I don't know what your situation is here. I would say if you are in the first bucket I mentioned, so if you have these other types of loans that aren't direct loans, go ahead, work on getting that consolidation application done, and then submit the waiver application through the help tool, and then we will do the work and reconcile everything on our end. I kind of forget what the original question was.
Yeah, it was, what if you've submitted for public service loan forgiveness, but you haven't consolidated?
So actually you're in really good shape too. So if you, so again, it depends on the type of loan you have. If it's direct loan, you're fine, you don't need to do anything. If it's another type of loan, you would probably get denied under the normal program. But because you've submitted your PSLF application in the past, we know that you're interested in PSLF. So please use the help tool to generate the new form. But even if you don't, we'll know that you're interested. And so we'll go back and give you credit for any payments if you consolidate into direct loans by the 31st, or I should say more technically, put in your application for consolidation by the 31st.
Awesome. So remind people when they're filling out the help tool, how far should they go back for their employers?
Okay, so you need 10 years, right, for PSLF, and PSLF only started in 2007, 2008. So go as far back as you have employers and payments that you can. So if you were working in 2005 at some company, that's not super helpful, right? Because you can't get credit for that. But let's say in 2008, you were working for a library, that might qualify. So submit everything from that you have for employers from, I would say, 2007, 2008 on. Just get it done. Because even if you had some quirk in 2011, and so your entire year doesn't count, let's say, but you submitted for 2009 and you still have from 2012 to 2022, you might have enough. And maybe those payments from 2008 will get you there. Maybe they'll bring you across the finish line. So my recommendation is like submit, 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 put down all those employers that you think are eligible, put them down and get that credit. And the worst that happens is you don't need it, right? The worst that happens is like, great, you have extra years. That's fine, you'll get forgiveness, but we don't want, why get denied if you were actually there just because you didn't add another employer on your application.
Great.
All right.
So can you consolidate private loans into a direct consolidation loan, and will that qualify?
Okay, so it really depends on, so in general, private loans, private student loans are not going to be eligible for any of these programs. You can't consolidate those into federal loans. There's like distinctions for this between, you know, FEL loans, which can be privately issued but underwritten by Ed. And so like half of everyone who has FEL loans is in that bucket, and the other half are just with Ed straight out now. So if you're in that bucket, that first bucket, you can consolidate into direct loans. But if you have like a loan from Sally Mae or just a completely College Avenue, something different, you're not going to be able to consolidate into, it's just a completely different product. There's nothing we can do. It's a third-party loan. So no, that's the answer there.
So back to the employment. For every employer you submit under this program, you have to get a signature, correct?
Every employer needs a signature. And I know that some employers are gone or you can't track them down. You just can't get their signature for whatever reason. Okay, that happens, we understand. It's best to get the signature, but if you can't, prove to us the employer existed and that they were in public service and that you work there. How do you do that? Send us those W-2s, send us documentation about what the employer did. Make that case. Hopefully you can get the signature, but I know people in the position that nonprofits disappear. I know it happens. So give us that evidence so we can give you that credit.
Great. So remind folks who have already submitted their forms how they can go back and check the status of their application.
Okay, so student8.gov or your account at Mohela is a way to do that. However, I don't think they're going to be fully updated yet. So I wouldn't just give it a few months, give it maybe till the spring, a few months, winter, spring, 2023, then go back, check your student8.gov and those accounts should be there and you should see the updated totals. So there's just a huge volume of applicants they're working through right now. So you might be sooner than that, but I just don't want to have you expecting it to be sooner and then it's not there and then you get freaked out, something's So just kind of hold tight, they're processing it. It's just a lot of people.
So when submitting the PSLF form via secure upload, is it sufficient to submit sections 1 through 4, just the 2 pages that have actual blanks on the form?
Okay, so I don't know this off the top of my head, but the actual blanks is fine. Just make sure it needs to be the part that has the certification as well, the employer certification and your signature. But as long as it should be like, you don't need the instructions or anything like that, just get us the forms with the blanks and the signatures. So I don't know exactly what sections those correspond to.
Great. So if I apply for the debt relief and PSLF, will this be an issue determining who is going to forgive them? I say this because potentially PSLF will be returning a couple of payments back to me.
So that's a really good question. So apply for them both. And I am not 100% certain how this is going to work. My understanding is they're going to do debt relief first, and then because they want to get that all adjusted and done by the time repayment starts. And then they will be applying Pslf to your account. So you might actually get more than you thought.
Great. That would be great news. For
Yeah.
sure.
So I'm not like 100% certain. I will get back and check with you all on that one. So don't 100% quote me on that, because I think also there's some weird caveats. But I will get you an answer on that.
Excellent. So if you worked full-time after your start date, should you only put employment dates as those that were full-time? Someone was 25 hours a week for the first 2 years when they made most of their payments, with several weeks where they worked 30 to cover shifts.
I see. Okay. So technically, yes, you could only do it from 30 hours. That's what matters here. However, if you have 5 hours somewhere else from some other nonprofit job, you could get some credit. So then you would want to submit even the time frame even for when you were working 25 hours, because remember, you can add other employment to get to 30. But if you're just like, okay, I only worked 30 hours from this point in time on, then yeah, that is really what matters.
So someone says they have Parent Plus loans and have worked full-time for over 20 years. They were told to consolidate these direct loans to qualify for the forgiveness. So I don't get credit for the payments before consolidation?
Yeah, so that's how public service loan forgiveness works in general. So if you had something that wasn't a direct loan and you consolidated, you only got credit from the time you consolidated, because it only applied to direct loans, right? So consolidation turns these other loans into direct loans. And so you can only get credit once you make payments on direct loans. So that was from the time of consolidation onward. However, if we're trying to give everyone credit, this is the waiver, right? This is the waiver in action. And I know the Parent Plus stuff is weird. So if you just had Parent Plus loans and you consolidated those into direct loans, and there was just Parent Plus, you're only going to get credit from the consolidation onward. Okay, so that's unfortunately the answer. It's just like a quirk of how they wrote the Parent Plus law and then how they wrote PSLF. But if you had like some other loan that you can consolidate in with the Parent Plus, then you could get credit for those payments. So it just depends. And I know there's a lot of people in this situation that they only have Parent Plus. So we're doing our best. Maybe there'll be some changes in the future. I don't know. But that's kind of how things are right now.
So if you worked in public service before you incurred your loans, do you count those, do those years count towards your public service loan forgiveness application?
So for PSLF, to get an eligible month of work, right, you need the employer, the qualifying employer, and then you need the payment, right? So if you have public service work from the past, but you didn't have loans that you were paying, that's not going to count. You need both those things together for it to count.
And then the very last question, should we continue to make payments on our previous loan with our old servicer while waiting for confirmation on our new consolidation through Mohela?
Okay, so first of all, hopefully you aren't payment pause right now, but if you're still in one of the buckets where you do have to make payments, or you're going to be starting to make payments in January, you should try to make sure that you continue with your payments. You don't want any problems. So just know that you would get a refund for anything that was improperly paid, but hopefully you would be paying Mohela by the time repayment starts. Everyone should be transferred over by this point.
Okay, Well, we have reached the end of our questions. I'm going to go ahead and put those links in the chat one more time for folks who maybe didn't catch them. So they're there. We will be sending a copy of the presentation slides with these links to everybody who registered for this meeting. We will make them available to folks. Thank you so much, Kirin, for being here. Thank you, Chandra, for being here. We are so grateful for both of you and the work that your offices are doing to make this program available. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your public service as well. We know you all work really hard. So we're trying to get this done, make this possible.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.